in discussing enlightenment, for you to think that you're at a point of enlightenment right now where you're just aware, and to think that there's not going to be other levels of enlightenment, or people haven't seen, or people won't be able to see what you see right now. To get a good understanding of that is just look at the thing. Everybody's heard, well, Jesus, if I would have known then what I know now, things would be different. People could look at it and say, well, when I was in grade 6, I was being bullied by somebody, and well, right now, if that would have happened to me, my actions and reactions would have been completely different. And now with what I know that I would do something different. Now, to think that what you know now is going to be what you know in 10 or 15 years, it's also very limiting of yourself. To think that your enlightenment at this point is going to be cast in stone and set in this way, when it's sort of delusional. But if you believe that, you probably won't grow anymore, and you probably won't evolve. But if you open your mind and realize that you should be having a continuous development in understanding that allows you to grow further and further. And that's what these moments of enlightenment are. But most people cannot realize this enlightenment because they take it for granted. They don't realize that, well, guess what? No, you have been getting smarter in time because, well, hopefully there's things and situations that how you view them now is not the way that you viewed them when you were a child. Hopefully, I would think anyways. But, you know, I'm never surprised when I see some people that do not choose to grow and learn from their experiences and adapt with that knowledge. And when we're enlightened to a new sphere or way of thinking, it's not like we should forget the way that we used to think. It's not like, okay, I thought life worked this way, and now I'm going to erase that, like erasing it on a chalkboard, and have this new way of thinking. Really, it's a matter of finding many spheres or levels of thinking, and to be balanced in between, and understand that I can see sometimes people are thinking in a certain way because I've thought that way myself. Now, I'm not going to judge them or think that I'm better than them because I've seen different ways to see things. In perspective, it's in the martial arts field that I'm in, it's like I can learn techniques, and then I can learn techniques that counter those techniques, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to teach those techniques anymore, because every way that you learn to think should be a catalyst, should be a stepping stone to think in another way. And to be able to relate to other people who think in different ways, the more ways or spheres you have of seeing or viewing life, the more capable you will be of communicating with people. And to communicate with people, like I said, you can't make somebody see the way that you see things now. But you can try to inspire them through different strategies, like to see outside of yourself is a key point. It's like this: if I see somebody doing something that is terrible, let's say somebody's beating their wives or beating their children or something like that, and I can think that's a terrible thing for them to do. And I'm going to say, well, if I went to that person and said, you know, George, I was watching the way that you're pushing your wife around out in the yard, and the way that you belittle and beat your children, it's not acceptable. Well, do you think that's going to teach George to go, hey, Dan, I think you're right. Man, what was I thinking? George isn't going to think that way. George is going to react, and he's going to be pissed off at me, and by pissing him off, there's no way that I'm going to inspire him to see things outside of himself. So let's say I sat down, I invited George over for a beer on an afternoon or something, and there was a movie on, let's say, where a woman was being beaten, the burning bed or something like that, where you can sit there and see it from a different perspective and feel the empathy and sympathy of what it is to be on the receiving end of that, and feel that that's wrong. And once you feel that's wrong, you should have that point to say, well, do I do this? Is there times when I act or react this way? Because we do have the power within ourselves to see things beyond ourselves. What I mean by that is, if I look at somebody and see what, let's say they're doing something very admirable, and I think in my life, well, given that circumstances like that in my life, if that person needed help, would have I volunteered to help that person? And if I think in my head and go, well, probably not, but I know and I felt that that's an admirable trait, so now I'm aware of that admirable trait, and now I can start to develop myself to say, hey, if somebody does need help, this is a noble thing to do. And on the other hand, I could look at somebody doing something that was terrible. Let's say they're losing their temper all the time, they're high-strung, and I look within my life and I think back and say, well, given certain similar situations, have I ever reacted that way? And it's going to allow me to see myself from outside of myself. I'll say, well, yeah, I have reacted that way, and now I know how people must see me. So I'm thinking, I'm looking at this guy losing his temper and jumping up and down and having a fit, and I'm thinking, what kind of retard is this guy? And that guy lost control. He has no control whatsoever. Look at him. And then you'll realize that, well, that's how you look. When you lose perspective, you get unbalanced or lose control. But when you're losing control, you don't know. So it's really a moment of enlightenment when you realize yourself outside of yourself. And it's just like that another sphere. It has to be an inspiration where you can actually see yourself in other people. And you can learn to grow positively from the negative or positive. So in both situations, like I said earlier, if somebody's doing something really noble and admirable, and you're looking at that saying, Jesus, I never did that, and I never helped somebody out in that situation, or I wouldn't have volunteered in that situation, but I can respect that person for doing that. Then it's like saying, well, no, I know within myself, and I felt within myself that that's a good thing to do. Now I can understand, why haven't I done this? So that's that enlightenment, that's that level of knowledge, and then you can work on developing yourself from that. Just like if I've seen something negative and realize that in situations like that, I've done the same. So I can grow positively from both situations. But you have to be enlightened. Enlightenment is that awareness, that moment when you see yourself outside of yourself, because ourselves usually is based from unbalanced emotions. That's why we mostly do things that we do that we regret. And it's a matter of realizing that, becoming aware, and slowly curving that. It's not like we're all perfect. We all make mistakes, but the idea is, in learning, you should lessen the mistakes that you're making. You're making them a bit less and a bit less, and eventually you should develop yourself. And we all have the power within ourselves. It's just a matter of learning to be aware. And being aware will really help you in your quest for enlightenment.